All right, welcome to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samuel?
Well, we've got raccoon dogs and COVID origins, which we're going to go over really quick because that won't take long. Then I've got some stuff on declining IQ, violence, and sex.
Mm,
Sounds like a good.
raccoon dogs, violence, and sex. Sounds like a good Saturday night. Where we want to start? Do you want to do the start with the COVID stuff since it should be pretty quick?
Yeah, it should be pretty quick. It's a little bit technical, and we can just get it out of the way. I
And when did this come out? Late last week? Is that when this?
think it was the 14th was the article I saw,
Okay.
but I believe I have the preprint. The study was
Mm.
the 4th.
So I started hearing it on blogs and news uh, mid late last week, and there was a new evidence that showing a evolutionary link uh, uh, to the outbreak of SARS-CoV-2. Once again, attempting to it, and I know these kind of journal articles take time to put together, but given all that has happened in the past several years, my antenna immediately go, boy, that's awful convenient when the lab leak was getting more press in the last couple of weeks, and then all of a sudden, oh no, look, the natural evolution is still on the table.
All right, for those that aren't familiar, here's what we're talking about. This is a preprint article uh, that has been making the rounds in a lot of the mainstream media. You know, the same mainstream media that would knock down anybody bringing up preprints on, effective treatments and, actual data that showed lab leak hypothesis support
Including people
and
like,
natural immunity. Remember that?
yeah, including people like, didn't Weinstein get banned, or did he just get throttled for early on bringing up the low probability that this was natural evolution? And he's an evolutionary biologist
Who studied bats, by the
who
way?
studied bats, and he wasn't allowed to speak. We're supposed to trust the science and trust the experts. You don't get much more expert on the subject than that.
Well, I mean, you would want a collaboration between someone like that
Mhm.
and some epidemiologists and some virologists. It's not who has the authority. It's we should have a collaboration with all of those different voices coming together.
Right, but instead what we did is we shoved people inside and welded them in their homes. Figuratively.
Yeah,
China
but
did it
but
literally.
instead of that, this is what we got.
Wait, what? I hmm, okay.
Yeah. So all of the same people who were saying, "Oh, you can't just bring preprints, blah 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 blah." Yes, you can because you can still read the methods, and we can all do our own peer review if you know how to read it, uh, and then let the best argument win. The fact that they weren't published in peer-reviewed journals is because the authorities at the NIH and all the people that are in charge of that decided there should be a filtering mechanism in all peer review where it was also filtered for the right message that would help public health. Most people don't know
Mm,
that went on. It wasn't just the magazines were refusing to do it. There was an additional peer reviewer added to the boards that was funded by the government.
I see no way that could go horribly wrong.
Yeah.
All right, but specifically on this, the raccoon dogs. Go ahead and bring up that
The Nature article.
then yeah.
Here we go. All right, so this is 2020, correct?
Right. So just take a look at we brought this up the last time we talked COVID, is take a look at the authors. And what this study is this was back in the news several weeks ago, because of the Fauci Freedom of Information emails that people have been going through, and they discovered an email, and um, you can find Fauci referencing this article when people are early on asking him questions in press conferences about the lab leak, and he references this article of no, these very uh, reputable, peer reviewed, blah blah blah, coming out, and they demonstrate how this uh, could and probably did happen via natural evolution. What he left out in those press conferences was that he solicited this article. This is not just a a natural uh, academic journal article that comes about from research that experts are doing. He solicited particular field experts to write this paper to come to this conclusion. So remember those author names as we go to what's in the news now, which is the raccoon dogs.
Yep. Okay, so genetic evidence of susceptible wildlife in SARS-CoV-2 positive samples in the Wuhan, wholesale seafood market. So there's one right here.
Mm-hmm.
Whoops. There's
And then
another right
Holmes,
next to them. And there's
Rombot.
another.
I believe Andrew Rombot was also on that previous one.
Yep. So the same people who basically wrote a bunk paper in 2020 to support something are the leads on this new, and somehow got a access to genetic material for just a brief period of time from the Wuhan lab, and then it was scrubbed again from everything. And I'm just going to give you the rundown of it. Anybody can see the link there and we'll link the study in the show notes. But the gist of it is they found DNA evidence, or I guess RNA evidence in this case, of SARS-CoV-2, and on the same spots there was found DNA evidence of raccoon dogs. All that tells us is that raccoon dogs and them with it, or someone with the virus, was at the same place at the same time. Plus, with the timeline, there were people infected before this sample was taken. So it doesn't show, it's still not showing a clear, this was only in animals at this given time. And then all of a sudden we started getting infected. So if you want to go ahead and believe the story that a bunch of people in the Wuhan wet market were eating raw dog meat and got sick and started spreading a disease, then go ahead. There's your story right there based on this article. Otherwise, I think the debate should still be open.
Well, this is so utterly asinine to me, even before you get into the uh, questionable academic standards of this article, is why do we continue to believe the Chinese Communist government? One of the early red flags when this was first starting that people mentioned back then and were called conspiracy theorists and banned or shadow banned from social media is that the Wuhan Institute of Virology scrubbed its servers. They had their research and genetic data up for other scientists to look at and help collaborate, check the data. You know, the normal things that a scientific institution would be expected to do. And then all of the sudden, out of the blue, I believe in November of 2019, all that disappeared. They took all that down. And now all of a sudden, now they're giving a specific piece of genetic data to outside researchers to look at and analyze. Huh. Interesting.
The only way to get to the serious bottom of this would be something to the degree of The Wuhan lab releasing all their records of all the sequencing they've been doing for the last 5-10 years, and in addition to that, a group of the best hackers in the world getting into their system to determine what's been scrubbed and what's been
Hmm.
altered since then.
Also remember that early on in fall or early winter of 2019, China was still saying, once they finally admitted that something was going on, because actually go back a second, prologue to what I was about to say is initially they weren't admitting that anything was going on. And there was I wish I could remember his name because it was rather heroic of him, recorded himself, put him up on social media, and it went viral talking about how sick he was and that others were sick and what was going on. And this was a doctor who had gotten infected and he disappeared. Nobody knows what happened to him. Nobody saw him shortly after that, and nobody knows what happened to him. Well, when they finally started admitting that something was going on, they kept assuring the world there is no person-to-person uh, transmission, which was believable because if this is a SARS virus, SARS-1 burnt itself out fairly quickly because you could only get it from animals. It didn't figure out how to jump from human to human yet. So that
And
was
still a
important.
lot of people got it.
And still a lot of people get it, but
Mhm.
it burnt itself out fairly quickly. Taiwan and I believe South Korea were saying no, no, we have evidence of person-to-person contact. And the World Health Organization ignored Taiwan. They would not talk to Taiwan because that would have been politically problematic because of the conflict between mainland China and Taiwan.
Yeah.
Yet here we are once again believing the Chinese Communist government.
Side note, remember this guy? What's his face? Actor, wrestler.
Oh, Cena, yeah.
Yeah, Cena, when he had to do his apology because he acknowledged Taiwan as a country. After that, one of the best Bill Maher moments ever. After that happened, he said, "Well, we've just proved that testosterone shrink your balls."
Yep.
Yeah. No, it's unfortunate, but I think that's really all we need to say on this because the jury's still out. This proves nothing. All it proves is these two things existed in the same place at the same time, which still could be someone bringing it from the place that's nearby that studies this kind of thing.
Hmm. Yeah. As Jon Stewart's infamous rant on Colbert is the name is on the building. And we don't know where it came from. The name is on the building. But of course, much like the other things we're going to discuss, the point isn't to share data and information and have a productive debate. And productive meaning more information, more ideas are shared, exchanged, tested against other thinkers so that you can come to a better conclusion of what is most likely correct. The point is to push a narrative, primarily for political reasons.
And those on the other side of the aisle, the point is transparency, because transparency would have probably helped a little bit in this whole situation. Would we have saved more lives? We don't know. But we could have tried with a little bit more information. Like what exact sequence were you working on? You know, what exact tissues were you affecting when you were modifying this thing through
Yeah,
the use of tissues?
another friendly reminder of stop trusting the Chinese Communist government. While they were saying everything was fine, they banned internal travel to and from Wuhan, but still allowed international travel.
And somehow, the most common destination for someone from those airports, Japan, had very little effect, especially early on. So, what's going on there? Now, Campbell has a decent hypothesis there. Japan's diet is very high in iodine.
Hmm.
and iodine kills SARS-CoV-2. So something might be correlated there. It might be just a better general health of the population, but it can't be population density, because isn't Tokyo the largest city in the world?
Pretty close to it. It's
It's at
them,
least the
Hong
most
Kong,
dense because it's a
Singapore.
lot of
Yeah.
people in one spot.
Hmm. All right. Well, where do we transition from there when we talk about narratives and nonsense?
Well,
Pick pick your poison.
we can talk about what kind of got this going, which is he came down here last weekend to go fishing, and well, the weather decided to not cooperate much, even though we still tried. We had a very late cold front here, which actually was decently cold for this
Hmm.
time of year. It wasn't freezing, but it was pretty close to it. Windy, yucky, rainy, all of the things that make going out on open water very uncomfortable. And also makes if anybody has a fishing background here, you want to hit before a front,
Hmm.
not during or right after, because they can feel the barometric pressure, and so they feed, and then they go dormant while water's muddy and cold and choppy, and they can't find their food anyways. So it was very bad timing for that. But as guys do, with a cigar and some liquor and a little bit of outside air with a fire going in the fire pit because we grilled some stuff up, you just talk about stuff. And we had been listening to some podcasts together, and a lot of it centered around some things we've been talking about: mating
Hmm.
crisis, uh, the dating crisis, the marriages, and what a man should be, what a boy should be, the confusion of gender roles, and all along those lines. So we probably have 30 different topics from those 2 nights, but I have a slight direction, but I don't know if there's anything you preferred to start with.
Nah, spin it off. Let's see where it goes.
Okay, so one of the things that came to mind as we're talking about female mate selection. And well, let me open with this, because I did want to open this. It's something I said during one of the Wheel of Time episodes, and just in case we have people that only listen to these as well, it was what I said when Min and Rand got jiggy after
Hmm.
all the violence. Right? I study a lot of sexual psychology, evolutionary psychology in relation to sexual selection, not because I'm some horny bloke that wants to to justify bad habits or anything along those lines. I would be better served by just spending more time working out and making more money in that pursuit, because then I would be more attractive to females, instead of spending a lot of time reading very complicated books and listening to very complicated podcasts and ebook uh, educational material. So I would be better served to do it a different way if that was my goal. Uh, it's fascinating. And the
Hmm.
reason I brought up our book episode was it's fascinating. And there, when you're trying to describe the power of it, it's the only thing we do in our hierarchy of needs that is counter to survival of me.
Mm.
Survival of me is first and foremost in every other habit we have, except when it comes to making and taking care of children. That actually takes off my life. That takes my resources. That adds stress to my life. That adds all of these things that shorten your life. So, or could very well shorten your life. You become protective in a way that you would die for people in the pursuit of making babies. So it's the only thing that is on our super hierarchy of needs that is counter to survival. And not only that, is it's so powerful that it can cause you to ignore all these other things. So if that doesn't add weight to the downstream effects on almost everything else we do in our life, then I don't know what else can. Just like exercise. I don't train people because I love exercise so much. I train people because I think it's 100% necessary that someone that knows what they're doing does so.
And more importantly, or perhaps important to that point is we didn't get into it because we're gym bros who like to gym, bro. It that is one of the great failings of so many personal trainers is they get into it because I like to work out.
So
I'm
therefore, I can make
buff.
other people better.
Therefore, I can help other people. No.
And the people that get into it for that reason, some see the light, but that's the exception to the rule. They either start ego training, just like they probably ego lift,
Mm-hmm.
or they burn out and stop. The turnover rate is like 3 or 4 weeks for people who try to jump into that industry. It's not very long when you
Yep.
realize, oh my gosh, this is hard work and I have to have empathy for my clients.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Um, I forgot what my thought was, so let's move on. We
Okay,
should
so that,
probably reference who we were listening to as well, for anyone who wants to go, listen to that stuff and see what sparked all this. It was Chris Williamson, right?
yep, and Tom Bilyeu.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the podcast name, it was Bilyeu doing the interviewing. Although
Mhm.
again, my beef with him is he talks more than the people he's interviewing. Although there were times in it, Chris started interviewing him in the middle of it. So it was it was actually one of the first that Williamson did that wasn't him interviewing somebody. So because he's basically been building up his little empire there. And then all of a sudden he was a big name before other people started interviewing him. So then he was on Rogan, he was on
Mhm.
Impact Theory, and all of these giant ones when he started from.
What I really liked about their discussion is because we've talked about the two sides of this quite a bit, but they really put them both together, which is that because of this masculinity and femininity crisis, there are serious demographic cliffs looming for most industrialized countries. The what was the stat they gave for China? Was it 2050? Their population was going to be almost cut in half. It was
Even more
was
so.
the expectation. Well, I
Yeah,
think it was
down to it's going to go down to.
1.2 billion to
I
650
thought they were
million.
more than 1.2 billion,
Okay.
but yeah, then it would be cut in half by those numbers.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
that's kind of the macro of what has been created uh civilizationally, but then on the personal level, it has made individuals absolutely miserable. They are unhappy, they are unfulfilled. Uh what were some of the stats they mentioned that 1 in 3 men ages, what was it, 20 to 29
20 to
have not
29. Yeah.
have not had sex in the last year.
Well, and there was another one that was very high percentage. I think it's the 20 somethings percent was men under the age of, or men between the ages of 18 and 30 had never had sex.
One of the interesting things about those stats to me is it reinforces something people need to remember. Social media isn't any more reality than any other type of media. It is a narrative. It is a picture, a a uh, a carefully crafted picture. Because if you look at media, both social and otherwise, you would think young people are out there having all kinds of sex, and they're not.
No, it is a select group of young people that are having all the
Hmm.
sexes. Uh, and that's kind of the direction I wanted to go because I actually am not 100% all on board with his sedation hypothesis.
You
The,
go over that real quick.
okay, so for those that don't know, in populations where a select group of the men get all the women, whether it's wives in a polygamous situation or there's not as many women, in that population, and the undesirable males get no attention. Or in some societies, like he brought up Portugal back in a certain time,
Mm.
where there wasn't enough women to go around, so the young males in the family, the older male got to marry, and the young males were shipped off to the new world.
It was part of it was during the age of exploration, and one of the things that prompted it that it's one of those interesting little tidbits of history, because if you look at the colonization of Portugal and go, but it's a tiny little country, and yet they were contending with Spain, a much larger empire.
So I will bring up another example. You look at Arab countries, not enough women to go around. The oldest in the family gets to marry, and all the younger brothers have to support the older brother and his new family. So not only do you get no loving if you're the younger brother, but you have to work for the person that is. And then along comes something like the Taliban and says, hey, if you fight for us, we're going to make sure you have status and you can marry once we're in charge. Well, guess what you got? You got a bunch of freaking freedom fighters because they're horny. And so whether you're getting shipped off the New World, whether you're joining a terrorist organization that's promising you good things, what was the draw of getting in an airplane and crashing it into the World Trade Center? 40 virgins in heaven, right? Because you ain't got no virgins in your earthly life. You're a young, sexless male who has no prospects. You're going to blow yourself up because you got this promise of something. The point of that is typically this situation creates violent young men in some way, shape, or form, however their culture around them forms it.
Mm-hmm.
But the sedation hypothesis is because of porn and video games and all of these things that keep us comatose in our mom's basement eating Cheetos and drinking Mountain Dew. We're not seeing that, except we might be. So remember the increase. Oh, we didn't give the timeline on the increase in sexlessness in young men.
Mm.
It was like 2005 to 2019. It went from 6% to 28%. So we're looking at a very short timeline where a lot of men are being left out of this. Now, this is standard violent crime for, let me see, I might have to move us here.
And that coincided with what I was talking about, which is the fakery of social media. So you're not getting sex, but you think everyone else is. You think it's just you.
Mm-hmm. Which goes along with the incel movement. Did you ever listen to what was his name I brought up? I gave you to listen to.
No, I haven't gotten around to that one yet.
Okay, so we'll go over that after you listen to it on another day. But this isn't all 2020 Summer of Love. It spiked way before that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and again, this is regular violent crime. This includes everything from property damage to holding someone up at gunpoint. I think it actually excludes murder in this data set. But let's get to homicide. Oh my goodness. Same timeline. 2014 going up. And of course, there's our 2020 numbers. Now, 2021 here, that is inaccurate because not everybody's reported yet. So this is not reflective of what the number is going to actually be. So it'll be somewhere between here and whatever the top end number. I have a feeling it'll be less than 2020 just because of everything that happened there. But it will be more than this number just because it's not all reported. But even still, we go back, we have a steady line for a while, and then we have spikes in this. And murder, I think, homicide, I think, is actually a better indicator because this is something that's typically done by 20 to 30-year-old men. So young men problem is homicide. Whereas some of these others, this includes things like domestic violence. So you can be married, you can have a life partner and still end up in this statistic, right? So I think the homicide is a little bit more telling.
Well, you brought up the example of violent groups, terrorist organizations, and it's not an accident that you have a demographic imbalance there. Well, we've got a demographic imbalance, we've got a happiness imbalance, and now you have people recruiting for uh violent protest organizations. There's no way to that. I mean, that's what they are. That
Mhm.
is what Antifa and BLM are and were. And even before that, you had the Occupy Wall Street movement, and that was supposed to be a counter to the Tea Party, even though there's a rant I could go on some other time, is they were complaining about the same thing. They just disagreed on the solution. But you wouldn't know that they were complaining about the same thing if you listened to the narrative. And they were so othered that you weren't allowed to talk to each other.
Well,
Well,
and that's where confounding variables come in,
and
because we had other things happening
mhm,
at that same time
mhm.
that could lead to increased violence. Now, that doesn't disprove, it doesn't help prove it, but it doesn't disprove, it doesn't knock it down to null at this point, because who's going to be more affected by these things? Young, angry men.
and and,
Young men
and
looking for purpose would be
mhm,
another
mhm.
group
That
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 is
that is a
affected by
better way
these
to
things.
put it, is because that's a major component of the masculinity crisis, is that men need purpose. They need an objective. That may be a more precise way to put it, because women also need purpose, but they find their purpose more easily because they're so coalition driven, uh, which which means that their purpose can be, the saying, it's not the destination, it's the journey. That really doesn't apply to men.
Mm-mm.
No, the destination is what we're trying to get to. The journey is a component of the experience, but what really matters is that destination.
No, I think you grow in the journey as men as well, as long as there's a clear destination that
Hmm.
you're moving towards. Because I still think even with men, if you never achieve it, you can still, if the journey is challenging enough and you can honestly reevaluate yourself and say, I did I did everything I could with everything I had, you'd
Hmm.
still come out of that a better person.
Well, an example of that would be something we've talked about before, which is the show Physical 100. All right, you can go out in the first round, but you were still one of the 100 most physically fit in South Korea, and they pulled from other places as well. So you can still say I was I was in the top 100 and I gave it my all in this contest.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I see it with my athletes too, because I can tell the mental difference between the ones that gave it their all and maybe they never made it out of the minor leagues, or they barely pushed through a certain position, maybe up to college or high school or any level they made it to. But they really put everything they had into it, always come out better. Whereas the ones that even they made it to a super high level, but there are things along the way that they could have done better. That's all they dwell on. So it is about the journey. The end result for all of these baseball players is Major League Baseball, and realistically, if you are competitive, is Hall of Fame, right?
Mhm.
Uh, but the amount of people that get there is very
Yeah.
low. But the attitude in the journey is still very uh, impactful, would be the word. Uh, so before we get to how this ties into the Williamson conversation, let's talk about another statistic. So we talked about crime going up. So I'm not all on board with his uh, sedation hypothesis. Let me get the right one here. Yeah, we'll do the CNN. headline first, just so we show we're nonpartisan. IQ scores are falling and have been for decades.
Mm-hmm.
Now, importantly, they have been for decades, but they've been dramatically in the last few years. So up to 75, they were going up, and then we started seeing a steady decline after 1975. And this is in all developed countries. Here's another. Are we getting smarter? The reverse Flynn effect. The Flynn effect is the fact that IQ scores had been going up with better nutrition, is the theory, and education. Then all of a sudden it stabilized and it started falling. Lots of things could be contributing to this. Social media, numbing of our brains, lack of physical activity. They blame in these articles education, but I mean, it hasn't gotten a lot better, but it really hasn't gotten worse either since the 1990s and the 1980s. It's kind of been the same model for quite some time.
Since the mid to late 70s,
Yeah.
we've been in basically the same structure, and we've just kind of tinkered around the edges.
So all of these things, yes, they could be contributing, but what is the major contributor? Is it the fact that we've reached a point of comfort in Western society that we're not challenged at a young age to where we would build that back up, which I've got a follow-up to this, which might be part of the solution end of it, or what? There's a lot of things. So we've got increased violence since men are less sexually viable. We've got IQ drops in about the same timeline. And then we've got the concept of, and this is where we get banned here for those that stuck around, female sexual selection, hypergamy, the dating crisis we have going on now. So I'm not all on board with his sedation hypothesis because we see these things going up. And even though there are other factors involved, it's still young men committing the acts. And I'm not all on board with no, I don't. They didn't even really discuss this. My hypothesis here is because of the newfangled way, which has been building since the 70s, women's movements, the feminist movements that we went over Mary Harrington last time. She said started getting regressive at some point. More women in the workplace, more women in education. Benjamin Boyce had a great tweet yesterday where it showed the numbers of women in law school versus men and the numbers of liberal women in law school, and then the number of liberal women with mental issues compared to other. So he said it's going to be a wild ride, but no, but it's the trend of basically this equity movement to feminize college admissions. So now we're getting close to a 2-to-1. It's like a two-thirds to one-third ratio now, but it's going to be a 2-to-1 ratio at some point where females are graduating from university with higher education and graduate school, and men aren't, but they're selecting for that in their filters. We have the fact that you can set a filter right away. And so that gap is going to keep growing where these sexless young men is going to keep increasing because less and less guys are going to college. Obviously, we know the numbers in height distribution. The average height is 5'9" 3/4 for the US male, and that's up a quarter. Woohoo. Whereas the filters are set at 6 foot, right? I joked to you, I don't know if I've joked on here, that if I was to get on a dating app, I would put my filter at 6 foot, and then my first line on my bio would be, I'm actually 5'11" 3/4. But I had to enter your filter. So we're going to end up with more sexless young men, more anger, more violence, and the IQ level is dropping because a lot of these smart young men that aren't having sex are not mating with the high achieving college graduate level females.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is going to be it might be a small problem now, but it is going to be a snowballing effect because these highly educated, high status females are not even breeding at all. You say, well, just match them up with the high status men. No, because these high status men are getting what they want.
Well, and to your point, with the statistics is where are they supposed to find those men? Because if
Mm-hmm.
you've got a 2-to-1 ratio in college, well, in college is where so many people used to pair up because you're at that time in your life and you're all around each other at the same place, pursuing the same basic goal, sharing the same basic interests. And so you're going to partner up there. Well, you can't do that if there's that big of an imbalance. And then afterwards, it's going to be more difficult because uh, you don't have that kind of contained system. You're busy doing life stuff. And it's just gotten worse because those women who did partner up there, well, they've taken that many men off the market, so to speak, that
Well,
the
it's
rest
even
of
worse
the
than
high
that.
achieving women want.
I'm going to add a level of complexity to this. So you're high beauty, high status, high intelligent, and you're in this market where because of your standard of across and up, there's almost nobody that matches up with you. You are so your your selection process is so pinpoint. On the male side, guys are willing to slide down the hierarchy if they have qualities that they like. So guess who's mating? Not the high status, high intelligent females, because there's not enough guys to go around.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you set education as a marker, because that's not intelligence in and of itself, but it is an indicator of it.
Mm-hmm.
So if these guys aren't competing on the education level, then you've selected them out no matter what their intelligence are. So if you finally find that and you're high status, high intelligence, everything, and you find a partner, yes, you're probably going to be in the elites. But 80% of women that never had babies didn't plan on that. So those people have selected everybody out of the market. Guys are willing to date across and down, which includes high beauty, low intelligence, especially if I'm a high status male that wants to start a family and all I can find in that high status, high intelligence cohort is women who are career focused. So
Yeah.
I lower my intelligence standards
So I'm going to hit on
because
the Hooters waitress.
that female realizes that I need a man to take care of me, but I have beauty and I'm going to use that. I have youth and I'm going to use that. I have fertility and I'm going to use that. Then you've got your stay-at-home wife. That but you've selected away from intelligence is the point. So the people that are breeding are all the people lower on the hierarchy, and then men that go across and down, and then the very few that find that great match. So I'm just going to leave it to your own imagination to see what is the greater number of the population that's in those categories.
So you said something that I ranted about while we were driving around, and it was reinforced when I got home and I listened to one of Mike Rowe's most recent podcasts where he interviewed Charles C.W. Cook, uh, a columnist, a writer, and an editor at National Review, because Cook is one of the more strident and outspoken critics of student loan forgiveness. And Mike Rowe runs a foundation for the skills trade for blue collar workers who want to find training for those kinds of skills. And so it was reinforced because as they were talking about how we've basically fetishized uh, college education, and we've done it at the expense of other valuable cultural things. So they made the point of we're talking about forgiving a big chunk of student loan. Um, and as Cook brought up, there's no means testing. It's just, oh, because you went to college, you deserve this. So you could have, a six-figure income and be perfectly stable. No, you still get that. Well, what about the guy who started working in construction right out of high school and built himself up to the point where he owns his own small business and he's got, you know, three F-250 Super Duties that he's got to pay for, plus all the equipment, plus the payroll of his workers. Those people really struggled through the lockdowns. A lot of those people, if they're still in business, went into debt to do it because that was the only way they could stay afloat. They don't get a bailout. Not only do they not get a bailout, as Cook pointed out, it's not even discussed. If you brought up in the halls of Congress, we should have a loan forgiveness for construction workers, they'd look at you like you had a second head. And the point as it relates to this conversation is when Williamson and Ballou were talking about what's the term for crossing up, how women date up crossing
Hypergamy.
up, hypergamy. There's nothing wrong with that. That's why behind every good man is a good woman, because that's how women make men better. The problem is what is defined, what is seen as a crossing up. Because I brought up the point of Mike Rowe, this before I knew I was going to be listening to him later, is something he talks about a lot when he talks about the skills gap and about the trades, is that they didn't go into it because it wasn't part of the show, and a lot of these people were rather humble. But he says almost everyone he met on dirty jobs was independently wealthy. Many of them were multimillionaires because they were entrepreneurs who had started their own business and that business was successful. That's a high status individual.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are fetishizing university degrees, you're not even going to considering that person, even though when it comes to money and status, that is a person who would be a crossing up for you. The All right, great, good for you. You've got a master's degree in you know marketing, and now you make a high five figures in HR. So that guy, literally covered in shit because he just got done fixing the toilets in your office, is a millionaire because he's got a fleet of 6 vans and crews in all of them, you know, and has been working since he was out of high school. But you're not even going to considering him. But if some guy, some management consultant walks in who makes slightly more than you do, you're going to go, "Ooh, hey, how you doing there?" Because, oh, he's got an MBA. Well, one, that doesn't mean he's going to be even remotely a good match for you. And two, he spent a lot of time in school where there were 2 women for every 1 guy. So there's a good chance either one, he's already partnered up, or two, he got so much action that he has no desire whatsoever to partner up because he
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have to.
Well, so I have a great idea to study this, and the particulars. We'll go over the overview of it. The particulars can be left to whatever grad student wants to take this on if they're listening. But to hit your point, that you just brought something up, and I don't want to forget it. That's had so much action that he's not even considering you. I have another thesis related to that we might go into more detail next time, but I want to say it out loud. We've talked about the erotic love versus the attachment love but you need so much time in that erotic zone to even develop the attachment. I think some of these guys that have gotten so much action through their entire 20s and early 30s, or even earlier than that, they've become incapable of actual erotic love.
Hmm.
There's no, I need to call this person. There's no, I want to, you know, that the chemicals I talk about that make you not even think about anybody else for a while because you're so infatuated with one person that you met at the right place at the right time in the right mental state. I don't even think they have that mental state anymore.
Hmm.
I don't think they're even so just thinking of people I know in my life, even if they go on a second date with a girl, there's none of that. There's no feeling of extreme want to the point that you ignore other things that we talk about. It's just, I want to get laid on the first or second date, and then I might call them back if they're good.
It's a perfectly credible hypothesis because
We
we
get
know
used to
that kind
everything. Your body
we
gets
know that
into a
kind of thing
homeostatic. Yeah.
happens all the time. You're a binge eater. You eat to make yourself feel good. Well, you're gonna have to eat more and more and more to
Mm-hmm.
get that state. You're an alcoholic because you need more and more and more to reach that state, and you keep indulging. You know, I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but I was listening to some psychologists, sex psychologists years ago, kind of the canaries in the coal mine for what we're talking about here, talking about the dramatic rise in young men getting ED prescriptions. And a major component of that was that they had become so desensitized because of the ludicrous amount of porn they were watching. And not just porn, but you don't have to work for it anymore. You can click to the end and just get off and you're done.
Well, there's another element to it is when it comes to masturbation versus sex, women in the audience, here's how you give a great hand job. Put your mouth on it because you cannot do a hand job better than I can do for myself. I've practiced this since I was 14 years old. Okay. Good hand job means put your mouth on it or sit on it because that's the only way it's going to be better than what I can do for myself. But there's just 2 cents in there. The
Minor tangent.
wisdom from Sexy Time with Sam. But
What was the other thought you had of a study? Because I think you had
okay,
another.
so we could probably do this. Someone could, with enough resources, could do this. What you need is a large cohort of the people you were talking about.
Mm,
The sweaty, dirty, poop covered men that built themselves up from nothing but are independently wealthy and so on, but also failed entrepreneurs. So people that are mediocre, middle age. So basically just people after high school that did their thing, right? That did the dirty jobs, the micro types. Have a large cohort of that ranges all the way through. Randomize them to a fake PhD account on a dating app
hmm.
and an honest account on a dating app. Then a cohort of PhD students, regardless of income, but we need the range. We need enough. We need a high enough in value that you get everybody that still lives in their basement, their mom's basement, excuse me, all the way up to highly successful, right? Randomize them to fake account where they're not touting their PhD to where they are touting their PhD. So if you get a high enough number, you're going to get the PhDs that have zero income in that honest group, and you're going
Hmm.
to get the PhDs. So and then get them out on the dating apps in the dating world where they'll match up based on these filters, and then see how the dates go and
Well, you
which
could
one.
do an initial study relatively easily, especially, if we're talking like a graduate type study, because, you know, you just advertise, hey, I need 20 women to do a survey study, and you just show them these profiles and select which ones, you would like to go on a date with, and then 20 more and show them the fake
But
ones.
they've
And
already done that stuff. I think this is
okay.
the follow up to it, where actually meeting the person, and
Hmm.
there are tells to success that aren't in the filters, right? So
Yeah, 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 yeah.
if you meet the highly success, this is why I want the range of income on both sides, because you're going to be able to tell the highly successful business people from the low success business people on those first couple dates. You're going to see the indicators of resource uh, accumulation. You're going to see generosity. You're going to see all of these other signs that women
Hmm.
look for, but
Hmm.
you can't get from a filter. And I would like to see the after 3 dates results from that kind of mixed up study. But it would take a lot of resources because you would have to find
Yeah.
a lot of eligible bachelors on both sides, which is getting more increasingly rare.
A- And eligible bachelors who want to participate in something like that,
Mhm.
that aren't so, beaten down that they've given up, or so self-critical that they wouldn't want to be exposed in something like that.
Mhm.
How long we've been at this? So did you have any other thoughts on this? Because I mean, we talked about a lot, but I don't know how much more we want to dive deeper or save for later.
Well, I mean, always having more topics for later is good, but that yeah, it was more the trend towards these two things, and then adding to that this phenomenon that we have uh, that is the basically the Western. I'm going to say the Western mating crisis because these trends are going all across all societies.
Okay, I have our tease for next time talking about this, because I talked about this, um, and I've been thinking about it some more, but I'd like to see if we can find some data on this to see if we are aberrations or if this hypothesis holds up, which is using ourselves as personal anecdotal examples. Because specifically, so I remember one of the stats they gave was that 50% of men whose partners earn more income than they do are on an ED prescription. And I think it was higher than that for those marriages that end in divorce when the woman earns more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
but
we,
I think the term was significantly more, so I don't know what the
yeah.
cutoff was, and there actually might be a minimum value for the male in that too.
Hmm.
Like say maybe the male's a starving artist and the wife's a high power lawyer or
Yeah.
something versus the man's a hardworking I don't know, name a middle of the road profession. Physical
Electric.
therapist. Yeah,
Oh, okay, yeah,
yeah,
something like that.
hardworking physical therapist. You're gonna make like 80,000 a year if you're working your butt off, and the wife is a CEO where she's making 500 grand.
Hmm.
That might be different than again the starving artist with the high powered lawyer.
So we should dig more into those numbers that they talked about because
I guess
uh
the way to put that in plain English would be: is the man a drain on the family versus a contributor that just doesn't contribute as much?
mhm.
And,
And I had some thoughts about that because we both our wives make significantly more than we do. I think
oh,
that is
there's
absolutely,
nothing I can do in my
yeah.
industry to make more than her other than become
Yeah.
celebrity trainer.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So, doctor, IT worker, they both make significantly more than we do, but so far we've bucked those statistics. Why? Well, I have some thoughts on that, and we'll get more into that
Well, it's
next
because I'm
time.
sexy as fuck. Come on.
I don't I don't have on my trophy husband shirt today, so
I got my this is how I keep it going, you know.
exactly.
All right.
All right, all right, all right, all right. All right, you have any closing thoughts, or was there any more you wanted to talk about?
Oh, no, I guess as far as closing thoughts is y- no, I don't I'm trying to put it into a
Hmm.
blurb, but I can't put it into a blurb. That's why you go so long sometimes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I will say, and I'm usually the pessimist here, but it was the stuff that Williamson and Blue were talking about was pretty dang depressing when you start getting into not just the statistics, because they gave a good macro overview of what's going on, but then they talked about, how that affects individuals, and he even brought up specific examples of people they've talked to or interacted with that are part of these statistics. And so I sent a text to my wife that, man, I'm glad we found each other when we were young and only kind of dumb, because the way things are going right now just suck. But one of the things we try and do when we're old men rambling, and in how we usually try and send off is, you know, take this information and go better yourself. The my rant about, the plumber versus the guy with the MBA isn't to say you're dumb, ladies. It's broaden your thinking. Critically evaluate what it is that are your underlying assumptions. If you're a woman, it's, what do I prioritize? What am I looking for in a partner? Where am I looking for? And if you're a guy who has, is one of those statistics who has given up or has very little hope in finding a partner, what can you do? What are your assumptions there that you are making that make you think that you are so undesirable? And what can you work on?
Well, and this is where a little bit of bias comes in, and I will again pimp it back out to you. I just looked up the name so I could get it, and for our audience,
Mhm.
uh, William Costello, and I said you should check him out on Michaela Peterson's podcast, but you can see him on Modern Wisdom as well. But he studies incels, and one of the things he always brings up is the mismatch in perception on what women want versus what men want, and what men think women want and what
Mhm.
women think men want. So there, I think David Buss calls it. I think he uses the word mismatch theory on evolution, on sexual selection. So we 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 try to think of the other sex as ourselves, and it just doesn't work that way.
Mhm. Mhm.
And as we do on this channel, as men, we problem solve, whereas women, they vent and talk, right? They form coalitions, they feel better. We want to get to the root of the problem and solve it. And part of the root of the problem is you have to find out why you're the lonely guy. And it could be easy. It could be as simple as, well, you're the lonely guy because you never leave the house. If it's because you're out of shape, and then maybe a little bit of gym time is your solution. And it's a two-part solution, because you're just going to feel better about yourself in general, and you're going to feel a little bit more powerful. You're going to be healthier. And then I guarantee you're going to expand your mating possibilities. If you were a 4 before because you were out of shape, you can make yourself a 6, no matter how ugly your face is, right? If it's an intellectual barrier, spend 30 minutes a day reading a book. It's not IQ, but it's knowledge. And what we convey to other people is knowledge. We don't convey our IQ score. Someone with a higher IQ can get knowledge faster, but
Mhm.
we can all accumulate knowledge. So any number of these things. Who was it? Gosh, got in hot water because they talked about Obama, Barack Obama. He, in his memoirs, talks about how he would read books that he knew the females he was interested in were interested in, so he could be interesting to them. And he took a lot of flack from the Me Too people. And it's like, no, that's what guys do. We try to impress ladies. And if I know what they like, I can learn what they like. There you go. Solution. He was the president of the United States. Maybe you get a date. You're both better off for it, right?
Mhm. And it's not to say that, uh well, you're depressed, just stop that. Okay, we know it doesn't work like that, but
But you have to
you
take the steps in order to Fix the underlying things that make you depressed.
Find an achievable first step.
Well, this is a statistic Costella brings up, which is interesting to this conversation because we talked about violence. The incel movement is kind of stigmatized as violent. Yes, there is a byproduct of violence where people who are frustrated, especially sexually, tend to be more violent, but actual violence with the mindset of I hate women from the incel movement is extremely rare. And that's towards men who are getting all the women and towards the females themselves. It's like 60. When it comes to violence numbers, 60 is nothing. Those were
Not
tens of thousands
yeah,
of numbers on those
not
charts I gave you.
percentages, individual instances.
Yeah. And 10 of those were from somebody who just had a social media profile that posted a lot of incel tropes, but it turns out he was just kind of monetarily benefiting from that market. So it's very extremely rare. These guys just really go into their own shell and every once in a while have an outburst in a random situation unrelated to that because they're so frustrated. It's not actual targeted violence. It's not the domestic terrorists that we're told they are. They're really depressed young men who have no outlet other than these forums and boards that they get on. So it's, find a thing. It might not be all the things wrong with you. It might not be all the things that will help you out, but a thing will bump your mate value. I always suggest, it's not because my profession, but start getting in shape. It is the thing that will bleed over into all the other things. Because, we didn't talk about IQ. This actually goes right into this. So I'm glad we didn't sign off too quick. How can you increase your IQ? Well, let's see. No. Let me find the right article. Hold on. Oh, balls.
That's COVID stuff again.
Yeah,
That's
COVID
not right.
stuff. No, that's COVID stuff. Or that's where did I put it? Oh, son of a. Those are the ones we did. Here we go. Climbing trees can improve cognitive skills. But what they taught, what this article goes into, it's all dynamic proprioceptive activities. Here we go. So, what are we doing when you're climbing a tree? You are evaluating where the next good step is constantly. And then if you feel something that is out of whack, you adjust on the fly. And what they've seen, at least in the short term with the studies they're talking about there, you increase your cognitive reservoir by 50% in a short period of time. Kids who climb trees have higher IQs. The imminent danger, the split-second decision-making, the feeling of your surroundings, all of those things are stressors that cause your brain to get smarter. You can improve your IQ.
Gee, and for decades now, we've been wrapping kids in bubble wrap and being helicopter parents and not letting them play with actual play.
Yeah, so enter
Curious.
new complexity to the equation of the IQ drop. More fatherless boys. Dad is the one that lets you climb the tree. Mama always protects you.
All right. Well, there's an interesting tidbit. Well,
That was supposed to flow into the other conversation. Sorry, I brought it out at the end because we forgot about it.
Well, it still works in trying to close this out that, it's more than just ranting and self-help cliches. We want to offer uh, actual, and not just because we're guys and that's what we do, but we want to offer actual tangible things that someone can use as an idea to do something, something specific. Take that first achievable first step. Uh, and I kind of think that some of the stuff we're going to talk about next time, I think there will be more of that as well, using ourselves as examples of some tangible things when it comes to uh, masculinity, femininity, and then partnering those two things together. So,
Now, I will say if you're an adult and we're talking about the climbing trees, there is one factor that you have to consider. We weigh more than when we were kids. So that's one of the things that makes
yeah,
climbing trees harder as we're older because branches break more often for us than they did when, I was 75 pounds and trying to find the highest I could get in the oak tree in the backyard. So yeah, there is that consideration. So disclaimer, we're not telling you go climb trees. If you do and you fall, that was all on you.
yeah, be smarter than that.
But there are controlled environments where you can do that. Ninja warrior gyms, obstacle courses, those water obstacle courses you can find at a lot of water parks now. Those are pretty cool. They're actually a lot harder than they look. I have great balance and I still was dying trying to get across the one that was at the local water park here. So I guess on my close, I would say, yeah, we're on my end. I just try to gather as much information and tie it together in the most clear ways that we can. And then we can start talking about solutions. I have my ideas, but they're by no means all inclusive. And a lot of times during the conversations, I'm changing the trajectory of my idea as we go. And we'll just keep going down that road and hopefully come up with some solutions that might help some people.
All right. Well, we'll see y'all next time,
Wheel time, drunk Matt.
where we actually may get into a little bit of this there as well, because we're with the ladies and the way they look at Matt, the way they think he thinks versus the way he actually thinks. The other interesting tidbit, as far as this conversation goes, is you've also got Neve and Birgit, who are both the more masculine female characters in the series, and yet they are both very different from each other.
Well, one thing about those two that put a bug in your brain is how actually motherly they both are.
Mhm.
Even though they have a lot of masculine traits, Nynaeve through nurture and Brigitte through fate, uh, they're actually very maternal figures as well when it comes to
Mhm.
dealing with other people and especially with children.
All right. Well, we'll dig into that next time, and we'll see y'all then.
All right, later.